Mere months after saying that toxicity is growing in fandoms and blaming social media for ruining fandoms, George R.R. Martin, the creator of Game of Thrones, is now actually siding with the fans against Hollywood for all of their rewrites and reimaginings. Let's get into it. Well, hey everybody, welcome back, and this is a pretty interesting one. I know I just covered this topic not too long back, about 2-3 months ago it feels like. So this article from Bounding in the Comics back in February talks about how Game of Thrones creator George R.R. Martin said that toxicity is growing in fandom culture, laments how social media is ruled by anti-fans who delight in dancing on the graves of anyone whose film has flopped. Now, I want to say there is a little bit of honesty to this, due to the fact that so many of us are so fed up with the fact that so many of our stories have been torn apart and just bastardized and ruined by a lot of these people in Hollywood who think they can do it better than the original. Again, we'll get into what I believe is the most egregious of these examples, but primary example I would say is definitely how the end of Game of Thrones went. Now, to be fair to the showrunners of Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin had yet to finish the books, and unfortunately they did have to write an ending to the story. Now, I was not a big Game of Thrones viewer, so I personally didn't care what they did with it. I never read the books, I barely watched the show, so I was like, I don't care. But obviously the fans were not happy with it. So now what we have is George R.R. Martin coming out saying that Hollywood screenwriters and producers believe that they can improve source material, but they only make it worse. So this article from That Park Place says George R.R. Martin bashed Hollywood screenwriters and producers for believing they can improve on the source material of standout authors such as Ian Fleming, Stan Lee, J.R.R. Tolkien, and others when they attempt to adapt the stories to film or television. In a recent blog post, Martin decried everywhere you look, there are more screenwriters and producers eager to take great stories and make them their own. It does not seem to matter whether the source material was written by Stan Lee, Charles Dickens, Ian Fleming, Roald Dahl, Ursula K. Le Guin, J.R.R. Tolkien, Mark Twain, Raymond Chandler, Jane Austen, or well, anyone. No matter how major a writer is, no matter how great the book, there always seems to be someone on hand who thinks he can do it better, eager to take the story and improve on it. And of course, improve is in quotation marks there. He continued, the book is the book, the film is the film. They will tell you as if they were saying something profound. Then they make their own story. They never make it better, though. 999 times out of 1,000, they make it worse. And God, that is so freaking accurate. And honestly, I would say this is actually very true with things like even the Jurassic Park movies. If you go back to the Jurassic Park, the first one, I think it came out, 1994 or something? Great movie. The book itself was also fantastic, but if you compare the two side by side, the book was definitely superior, and nothing happened in the movie the way it happened in the books, like barely anything. Different characters acted differently. You liked different characters in the book than you liked in the movies. Different characters died than what died in the books. So very many times it's true, these adaptations are vastly different from what you have in the books. And again, seldom are they ever better than the book. The article goes on to say, however, he did note that sometimes they do indeed get it right, as he praised FX's recent Shogun adaptation. Once in a while, though, we do get a really good adaptation of a really good book, and when that happens, it deserves applause. I can come across one of these instances recently when I binged the new FX version of Shogun. I think the author would have been pleased. Both old and new screenwriters did honor to the source material and gave us terrific adaptations, resisting the impulse to make it their own. Yeah, I watched the first episode of Shogun. It's not that I lost interest, I just haven't had time to go back and finish it, but I thought it was very, very well done. Apparently very accurate to the book as well, so I think clearly they made a fantastic show out of a very, maybe not so well-known book. I know that I'd heard of it before, but definitely not on the same level of Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones. It says, this is not the first time Martin has made such comments. Back in 2022, Martin, alongside novelist Neil Gaiman, spoke on the subject during an appearance at the New York City Symphony Space. Martin rhetorically asked, how faithful do you have to be? Some people don't feel that they have to be faithful at all. There's this phrase that goes around, I'm going to make it my own. I hate that phrase, and I think Neil probably hates that phrase too. Gaiman responded, I do. I spent 30 years watching people make Sandman their own. And some of these people hadn't even read Sandman to make their own, they just flipped through a few comics or something. Martin then detailed, these are the changes that you have to make, or that you're called upon to make, that I think are legitimate, and there are other ones that are not legitimate. And I think that's very true, and we're going to get into that in a second too, because again, it's very pertinent to another topic that we're going to discuss about which changes you should make and which ones you can't. And I think another obvious example are shows like, Wheel of Time is one that is derided as being very woke, very bastardized version of the books, not as good as the books, vastly inferior. We've seen The Witcher, which, again, I played the games. I didn't read the books, and I was actually going to buy the books, and somebody told me they're actually not that good, not that interesting. I need to get them and make up my own opinion on that, I think. But we've seen this with The Witcher show that completely derailed from both the games and the books. So it was like it wasn't even the best of either one. It was the worst of both. And of course, it did a lot more focusing on the women and made Geralt kind of a non-existent character in the third season when Henry Cavill finally left. I'm calling him Henry Geralt now. And now we've seen Liam Hemsworth come in, and he's been just slammed over this. And I don't think it's his fault. I think he looks okay in the role. I just don't know that it's going to be the same kind of iconic role as having a guy like Henry Cavill in here. But now we're seeing the absolute most god-awful thing that I could have possibly thought that would happen in this new season of Rings of Power. Rings of Power, the most, we'll say the worst offender when it comes to the reimagining, making it our own thing that George R.R. Martin was describing. Because this first season, I don't know if I have to convince too many of you, the first season of Rings of Power was complete crap. It didn't hold true to Tolkien, it didn't hold true to any of the lore, it didn't even hold true to the things that happened in Lord of the Rings in the books. And somebody pointed out on a live stream, I think it was on WDW Pro, one of the guys that was their Lord of the Rings, aficionado, he couldn't understand why, when they had the access to the appendices, to all the Lord of the Rings books, why not feature or focus on the War in the North with Arnor and with the Witch King of Angmar, and you could have gone through all of that, and they had the rights to use every bit of that. Instead, they wanted to come back and tell their own version of hobbits, their own version of elves, their own version of men and the Númenóreans, and all they did was make it inferior, poor-looking costumes, massively bloated budgets, terrible acting, bad script, and all they did was try to make it as diverse and female-centric as possible, and it turned out terrible. Now we have Season 2 featuring Tom Bombadil, a character that 99.9% of people, if they only watch the movies and never read the books, are going to go, who the hell is that? So I vaguely remember the character when I first read the books years ago. He's a very obscure character. So obscure that Peter Jackson chose to not add him to the original trilogy movies that he was in charge of. Rightfully so. When you actually read about the character and you look at him in actual physical form, this could be the worst thing that Rings of Power could have done for Season 2. I thought casting Charlie Vickers, who played the Sauron, not Sauron, made-up guy that they had, the human form of Sauron, was bad, and then bringing him back as the elf that doesn't even look ethereal or beautiful. He looks like a guy with a 5-head with a bad wig on. I thought that was the worst decision they could have made. But apparently they decided to one-up that. So now we have Tom Bombadil in Rings of Power, a show that is already not faithful to the source material, not faithful to the fans, antagonistic towards the fans. Again, a show that decided to cast minorities and overweight people and, just everybody that they could cram in there to say, okay, if you don't like our show, it's because you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're transphobic, you're fatphobic, whatever phobic they want to throw at you. When the reality is you just look at it and say, no, it just doesn't look like Lord of the Rings. That's all. It doesn't fit with Tolkien. That is 100% the big issue with it. So here we go again. They're creating another character that's not going to match his actual book form. It's going to be disastrous on TV. Honestly, I cannot imagine sitting through a second season of this show now that they're putting Tom Bombadil in here. But you guys are going to have to let me know what you think about this. Of course, the shill sites like OneRing.net is out here saying how amazing it is and how stunning and brave it is and how much they're going to be like eating it all up and looking forward to it. But personally, I think this is going to be a disaster. Either way, let me know what you guys think about all this, and I will catch you on the next one. Alright, and if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you for being here. I do have 2 channels, Minimal Effort Podcast, as well as my gaming channel. I do have a Twitch and Kick for my gaming channel. We do live streams over there occasionally, maybe once a week. And then if you are in the market for a new PC, make sure to check out Meta PCs. Click the link I have down below. Use code TBO at checkout for a special discount. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.